What if I told you that Iran, yes, the nation we know today as Iran, holds a significant place in the Bible's sweeping storyline of prophecy and world events? When most people think of the Bible, they picture names like Israel, Egypt, or Babylon. But what if I told you that Persia, the ancient name for Iran, wasn't just a background kingdom, but a nation mentioned by name in Scripture, playing a direct role in God's plan for His people? The biblical connection to Iran goes deeper than many realize. From Noah's descendants to the rise of Cyrus the Great, the story of the Iranian people is woven into some of the most critical moments in biblical history. Here's what's truly surprising. God used Persia, a kingdom that did not worship Him, to rescue His people, allow the rebuilding of the temple, and fulfill prophetic words spoken long before these events occurred. In this video, we'll explore how Scripture traces the origins of the Iranian people, their rise to global influence, and their prophetic role in both ancient times and what lies ahead. So get ready, because this perspective might change how you see Iran, not just as a player in modern geopolitics, but as a nation that God used, and may yet use, in His sovereign purposes for the world. To see Iran's biblical foundation, we need to go back to Noah and his descendants after the flood. According to Genesis 10, all the nations of the earth trace back to Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. One of Japheth's sons was Magi, the ancestor of the Medes. The Medes would later align with the Persians, forming the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most influential empires recorded in human history. The descendants of Magi, the Medes, settled in the region we now know as Iran. The Persians, rising from this same area, would become a dominant force, but both shared a common ancestry rooted in that ancient lineage. So according to the Bible, the roots of the Iranian people can be traced to Japheth through Magi, placing them within the biblical narrative from the earliest days after the flood. This genealogical link places Iran in one of the Bible's oldest recorded family trees and helps us understand why Persia plays such a prominent role in the unfolding story of God's work in the world. As history moves forward, we witness the rise of Persia, a kingdom that would take center stage in the biblical account. The Medes and Persians joined forces under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who established what we know today as the Achaemenid Empire, history's first Persian empire. At its peak, this empire stretched from the Indus River all the way to North Africa, covering regions like Israel, Babylon, and Egypt, places deeply connected to the biblical narrative. But Persia's role in the Bible isn't just about power or land. Its true significance lies in how God used this empire to bring about His promises to the people of Israel. In 586 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and took the people of Judah into exile. As the prophet Jeremiah had foretold, God's people remained in captivity for 70 years, just as He had said. Then, in 539 BC, everything changed. Cyrus the Great, now king of Persia, conquered Babylon and set a new course for history. The book of Ezra begins with an incredible declaration, a royal decree from Cyrus allowing the Israelites to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. In Ezra 1:1-4, Cyrus proclaims that the Lord, the God of heaven, had given him all the kingdoms of the earth and called him to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. What's astonishing is that this moment wasn't just history, it was prophecy fulfilled. More than a century before Cyrus was even born, the prophet Isaiah named him as the one who would carry out God's plan to restore Israel. Isaiah 44:28 and 45:1. Here we see something powerful. God used Persia, a nation outside the covenant, to bring redemption to his people. This was a major turning point for Israel and showed clearly that God's purposes can be carried out through anyone he chooses. Cyrus the Great stands out in Scripture as a pivotal figure in this plan. In Isaiah 44:28, God calls Cyrus his shepherd, the one who would carry out his will. And in Isaiah 45:1, Cyrus is even referred to as God's anointed, a term usually reserved for Israel's own kings. How could a king who didn't worship the God of Israel be given such a title? The answer points us to the greatness of God's sovereignty. He rules over nations and kings, using whoever he wills to accomplish his divine purposes. Cyrus's decree wasn't just an act of politics, it was the fulfillment of prophecy. Jeremiah had spoken of the 70 years of exile, Jeremiah 25:11 through 12, and Jeremiah 29:10. And the rise of Cyrus marked the precise moment that prophecy came to pass. Persia's role in biblical history doesn't stop with Cyrus and the rebuilding of the temple. The book of Esther gives us another remarkable account of how God used Persia to safeguard his people. During the reign of King Xerxes I, known in the Bible as Ahasuerus, a dangerous plot emerged. A high-ranking Persian official named Haman devised a plan to destroy the Jewish people living throughout the empire. Driven by hatred and pride, Haman convinced the king to issue a royal decree permitting the extermination of the Jews. But God was already at work behind the scenes. By divine providence, a young Jewish woman named Esther had become queen of Persia. Encouraged by her cousin Mordecai, Esther made a courageous decision. She approached the king, risking her life, to reveal her identity and plead for her people. In Esther 4:14, Mordecai famously says, "And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther's boldness led to a dramatic turnaround. When the king discovered Haman's deceit, he had Haman executed. A new decree was issued, giving the Jews the right to defend themselves. This account is remembered every year during the Jewish festival of Purim, a powerful reminder of how God used a faithful woman in a foreign empire to protect his covenant people. The story of Esther is one of divine protection and timing, and once again, the Persian Empire became the setting for God's unfolding plan. Though Persia was not part of Israel's covenant lineage, it played an essential role in preserving the nation chosen to bring forth the Messiah. Persia was more than a background character. It was a key participant in the survival of God's people. But Persia's place in the Bible isn't limited to the past. It also appears in prophetic visions about the future of world empires and God's eternal plan. We see this clearly in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a prophet who served during the Babylonian exile, held high positions in both the Babylonian and Persian empires. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a great statue composed of various materials, each symbolizing a world empire. The chest and arms of silver represent the Medo-Persian Empire, which would follow Babylon as the dominant power. Then, in Daniel 7, Daniel sees a vision of 4 beasts, each representing a successive kingdom. The second beast, a bear raised on one side, depicts the Medo-Persian Empire, emphasizing its dual nature and unified strength. Persia's rise under Cyrus the Great reshaped ancient history, and these prophetic visions point to its lasting impact. In Daniel 8, the prophet sees another vision, a ram with 2 horns. These horns symbolize the Medes and Persians, charging outward and conquering territories. But the vision continues with a goat, representing the Greek Empire led by Alexander the Great, who would ultimately overthrow Persia. These prophetic images reveal something profound. Persia's rise and fall were not random. They were part of God's sovereign plan. Every empire, every ruler, every shift in history moves under God's control, and Persia was no exception. The rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem under the leadership of Zerubbabel, supported by King Cyrus of Persia, marked a major turning point in the restoration of Israel. God didn't just bring down Babylon, the empire that had crushed his people. He used Persia to rebuild what had been destroyed. Through Cyrus, God opened the door for Israel's return and renewal as a nation. This powerful act showed both Israel and the surrounding nations that God's plan isn't limited by borders or rulers. He can work through any nation, even one far from the covenant, to fulfill his purposes. Though Persia's dominance was eventually replaced by the rise of Greece, it was during Persia's reign that key prophecies were fulfilled, promises spoken by Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel about the restoration of God's people. Even after Persia fell to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its influence lingered into the New Testament era. By the time of Christ's birth, Persia had been succeeded by the Greek and then the Roman empires. Yet the imprint of Persian culture, administration, and religious tolerance shaped the ancient world in profound ways. One of the most fascinating links between Persia and the New Testament is the story of the Magi, the wise men who journeyed to worship the infant Jesus in Matthew 2nd. Many biblical scholars suggest that the Magi came from Persia, possibly Zoroastrian priests familiar with interpreting signs in the heavens. Their search for the newborn king of the Jews shows that even outside the borders of Israel, people were being drawn to God's work. Their journey is a reminder that Persia remained connected to God's story, even after its empire had passed, recognizing the significance of Jesus' arrival. Furthermore, Persia's legacy of allowing religious freedom helped create an environment in which Jewish communities could thrive throughout the region. This spirit of tolerance would later influence the Roman world, where Christianity would begin to spread. As we reflect on Persia's biblical role, it's also important to consider its future place in prophecy. Many theologians believe that modern-day Iran, biblical Persia, will again play a significant part in end-time events. Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 describe a future alliance of nations that will rise against Israel in the last days. Among them is Persia, joining forces with Gog of the land of Magog and others in a climactic confrontation known as the War of Gog and Magog. Though there is much debate about when and how this prophecy will be fulfilled, the inclusion of Persia suggests that Iran's presence in the region still holds spiritual and prophetic significance. Daniel's visions of the rise and fall of empires, including Persia, highlight a deeper truth: that God is sovereign over every kingdom, every ruler, and every timeline. The Emperor of Persia, with all its power and influence, was never beyond God's reach. He raised it up for a season, used it for his glory, and brought it down according to his perfect will. As we observe today's events, especially the growing tensions between Iran and Israel, it's crucial that we view them through the lens of Scripture. These are not just political struggles. They are part of a much larger narrative. A narrative that began in the pages of the Bible and is moving steadily toward the fulfillment of God's promises. Persia's journey, from its ancient roots in the descendants of Japheth through Magi to the rise of Cyrus the Great, shows how God can use even foreign empires to protect, restore, and advance his redemptive plan. From the rebuilding of Jerusalem to Esther's brave stand in the Persian court, Persia played a central role in preserving the people through whom the Messiah would come. But Persia's story doesn't end in the past. The prophetic words of Daniel, Ezekiel, and Isaiah show us that Persia, now modern-day Iran, is still part of God's unfolding plan for the future. As we witness world events today, we're reminded of a vital truth. God is in control. Every ruler, every nation, and every conflict is within His sovereign hand. The story of Persia is more than ancient history. It's a living testimony of how God can use even the most unexpected players to fulfill His eternal purposes. From ancient Persia to modern Iran, the biblical connection reminds us that history is not random. It is the deliberate unfolding of God's plan for the redemption of His people and the world.
Now that you've seen how modern-day Iran connects to Bible prophecy, you might be wondering, what other nations are mentioned in the Bible as coming against Israel alongside Iran? If you're curious to find out, make sure to watch this next video where we break it all down.